Oh, nice. Oh, that's it. That's the log.
Here's your guy.
Scary.
Look at that chunk of wood though, eh?
What is it?
I think it's a
Cadillac log?
That's a 16-foot.
Yeah. 14 and a half, almost 15 foot maple burl. And this was milled here by GL Veneer. 4 inches thick,
Yeah.
basically at the narrowest or at the thinnest we're finding on these.
Yeah.
And it's packed with figure. If you guys are interested in a table from this, well, you can see what we've got. There's a limited supply of it, so send us a message. They're not going to be cheap, but we can do some amazing furniture with these slabs.
They're a once-in-a-lifetime log is what this is here.
Yeah. If you guys want to see some other videos of tables that we made using wood from this tree, we'll put a link to the playlist, but we've done one for our client in Chicago who had river rocks. We did the massive 18-foot table for the client in Wisconsin. We did the preservation solutions table for our supplier down in Colorado. And then we did the piece for our client in the Pacific Palisades, which unfortunately burnt down. But we are going to be starting the new build for that soon because he's getting close to being done with his construction on his new home down there. And that's also, of course, going to be from that once-in-a-lifetime tree. As soon as we got the news, we saved the next best slab for him. We recently completed our 5th piece using slabs from the once-in-a-lifetime maple burl tree. And this client not only ordered a dining table, but he also got a set of 3 chairs to go along with it. Some of the slabs you've seen in our previous videos using this tree featured giant slabs from this tree that were fully intact, and we either left them live edge or cast around them with some resin. Some of the pieces from this tree were split right in half, and that was because of the large rotten section that went up in the middle of this tree. So when we got closer to the outside cuts, after they were milled, they just fell apart. So that's one of the pieces that we're using for this client's table. He wanted a 48-inch diameter round table. So we took one of those half slabs that had the nice burled edge going down the one side, and we're cutting it in half to then flip those edges in to face each other and give us a pretty nice layout for this round table. Once we've got the slabs cut down, we can do our usual debarking process, and then with our SCM machine, we're going to send it through to get them all perfectly flat before we take these pieces upstairs for the resin pour. The resin color that you're going to get to see us do is also a little bit different than our typical. It's a base layer, but normally when we do these base layers, it's going to be a solid metallic pour that's got a lot of that glitter and sparkle in it, whereas this customer just wanted a flat color, none of that metallic, just kind of this greenish gray that I think turned out really nice. When it comes to building a mold for a round table, there's a few ways that you can go about it. Since we have our CNC machine to cut this piece round afterwards, we just like to make these octagonal molds, mostly to save on the volume of resin we have to use. But if you don't have access to a CNC machine, you can actually build a perfectly round mold. I think I've seen people do it with like that gardening lining that you see in flower beds. Another way that you can do it too is actually pre-purchase a reusable form. We sell some of those on our website, and they do go up to 48-inch diameter. They're just basically a vacuum form sheet of HDPE, and that can be reused as many times as you want, but it is going to be a more expensive way to create your mold. Once all the silicone on our mold is dried, we can start mixing up that unique color that I mentioned earlier. So as you can see, there's not a whole bunch of metallic in this pour to create the texture. Instead, we're going to time our base layer and our top layer perfectly so that we can get a nice rippled effect. In order to do that, the best way we found to test it is not just by time, but actually by the consistency of the resin itself. So we'll just use a popsicle stick, and we're testing so that we can easily dent that base layer, but not have it stick to the popsicle stick when we go to pull it back up. And that's kind of that perfect sweet spot where the resin is going to be soft enough to create this rippled texture, but not so soft that it's going to start to blend with your clear top layer. For us, in our air-conditioned and liquid-cooled environment, that's usually somewhere around 24 to 36 hours, but if you've got a warmer shop, that could be even quicker than that time frame. Now you can see us pouring on that clear layer that I mentioned, and at this point we've got our water cooling going on the table beneath, and once this pour is done, we're going to be blowing some fans on the surface as well, and that's all just to dissipate the heat and the chemical reaction that's going on here. The epoxy is going to generate quite a bit of heat, and if you leave that unchecked, that's where you're going to get a lot of those bubbles and unwanted reactions occurring in your pour. After that sat for 7 days, we can begin the demolding process, which is nice and easy because all we've used is silicone and tuck tape for our mold, so we can pop all those off and then get this piece lifted downstairs to remove all of that excess resin.
See, we should spin this so it's actually supported. In theory, these are both flat tables.
Now, although we've got our fancy giant planer, it still needs a nice flat surface to reference off of. So once a piece has been demolded, we go onto our Avid CNC machine, we just flatten off that top layer so everything's nice and smooth, and then the remaining flattening process can all be done in the SCM. And the nice thing about the SCM machine is not only does it have that planer head, but it has 3 sanding heads afterwards. So we can do the planing and then go 120, 150, 180 grit and have a piece coming out the other side that has already had a substantial amount of the sanding labor taken care of. And now we can head over to our CNC machine to cut this piece to its final size. So like I mentioned, we only needed to go with this octagonal mold because our machine is going to be able to cut this piece perfectly round afterwards. Now, although it's a big, heavy-duty piece of equipment, we still have to cut this in multiple passes to ensure that we get a nice clean cut. If we were to try and just plunge through this in one cut, we would probably break off one of our cutters and risk chipping out the table itself. Once we're done on the CNC machine, we can begin our sanding process. Now, I did mention that this piece came out of the SCM at 180 grit. Regardless of that, we still typically start our sanding around 120 because the type of sanding makes a difference on the type of scratches that are left on a table. So the big difference is there's way fewer passes required than if we, let's just say, came straight off the CNC machine and had to take out all of those chips and uneven lines that were left from the cutter head on the machine. So the time is greatly reduced in that aspect, and then we can move on to the filling process. And on burl wood, that does end up being quite a bit more time consuming just because the growth of the tree comes with all these natural pits and voids in it. So we like to use a combination of products. For the really, really small holes, we use our Black Forest CA glue because it comes in a very thin viscosity so it can wick into those small holes really well. And then for the ones that are a little bit larger that we want some clarity on, we'll usually go to our 5-minute epoxy because that can handle those bigger voids without having a lot of bubbles like the CA glue would. And as always, we like to add recessed pockets on the underside of our pieces just so those plates that mount to the underside of the table aren't sticking out. And speaking of the base, you probably guessed it, this client is going with our signature Black & Ash X base, and it will match the finish on the chairs that you're going to get to see us make later on in the video. The nice thing about our X base is that it can be easily sized depending on the size of table that we're making. So for a round one like this, obviously we're just going to make it symmetrical and shrink it down so that we're going to have good leg clearance going all the way around the piece. And our CNC program we have is parametric, so it's quite easy to just go in, change that programming, and cut out a new size base that's going to be perfect for the table. So we don't have set sizes of bases that our clients have to pick from. Each base is custom manufactured depending on the size of the client's table that they've ordered. So what you're seeing being machined here right now is usually what we would call the smaller X, but in this case, like I said, it's symmetrical. But it's going to be the X that overlaps on the joinery and is going to enclose the other two pieces that are half lapped together. Even though we've used our CNC machine for this, there is still some limitations. All of our cutters that we use are round, so they leave a radius on them, which isn't necessarily what we always want. So in that case, we just have to use a chisel to do some handwork and get nice, sharp, square corners. Once all that handwork is done and we've got everything fitting the way we want it, we can go ahead and start doing the first glue up on this base. So this is going to be for the half lap. Like you would assume based off the name, we're taking out half the material on both of these pieces so they can join together and be completely flush afterwards. You'll also see on each of the faces of that half lap glue up, we've taken a little bit of material off the top and bottom side, and that's so we can take the other two pieces of the X base and have them wrap around and actually fit into a groove so everything is perfect and seamless afterwards. Once the base has been assembled and sanded, we can go ahead and put that black stain on there. We've recently been experimenting with some different products. We used to always go with that General Finishes black dye stain, which still works amazing, but we've tried India ink recently, no specific brand, and It's almost even easier to work with. So if you're doing a project with this dark black stain, you might want to give that a try because we have found the process to be easier to apply and a much more even black when you're done with it. And you leave it to dry for 24 hours and then you can put any kind of finish over top of it. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and use our Black Forest UV Cure finish. We've been using this finish probably for about 6 months now, and it has completely changed our finishing process. In the past, these pieces would sit upstairs for weeks at a time, whereas now we can have a piece completed and ready to go to our customer the same day that we take it upstairs to start that finishing process.
All right, so here we have our Black Forest UV oil. I'm just mixing that with some black ecopoxy dye, and that gives us a nice dark mixture. It doesn't cure 100% because the balance is off, but it allows us to get rid of any little specks of white that we still have shining through. So we do a coat of this and then 2 more coats of our normal Black Forest LED oil.
We don't have any pre-stained products for the UV Cure finish, but like I said, in our few tests that we've done, we've had some great success adding our own color to achieve basically a custom finishing product. And that's what you're seeing Garrett do here right now. There was a few spots on this base after that initial coat where you could still see grain in those open grained sections. So we mixed in some of that India ink. We're rubbing it in with a white non-abrasive pad on an orbital sander, and it's just pushing all of that pigment into every pore of the wood, and then we can instantly cure it with the UV light. And now we can head back to working on the tabletop now that we've got everything to the finishing stage. When it comes to naturally stained wood that isn't going to receive a color, we like to use our Black Forest furniture oil before we add the UV Cure finish. We've done a few tests, and what we find is the furniture oil brings out a deeper, richer color than the UV Cure oil does on its own. So that's what you're seeing Jack do here right now. He's just soaking the entire piece in our furniture oil, getting a nice liberal coat of it on there. Then he'll go ahead and buff off the excess and let this one cure for a few days. We do add the catalyst into our oil during this process as well, so instead of having to wait a week before we apply the UV finish, it's just 2 or 3 days. Now that that first coat is cured, we'll lightly scuff it up with a high grade of sandpaper, and we can follow this up with 2 or 3 coats of the UV Cure finish, depending on how porous the wood is. In this case, the burl was pretty dense, so we did 2 coats, and we got a really nice semi-gloss finish out of the piece. The trick with this finish is the same as any hard wax oil. You want to apply a really, really thin coat, and you do not need lots of excess on the surface. So that's why you're actually seeing us use a microfiber cloth on our gem polisher as opposed to our usual non-abrasive Scotch-Brite, because that microfiber is going to pull off even more material than the Scotch-Brite would and just result in a much smoother finish. Once we've got the finish looking the way we want it, we can come around for a few passes with the UV Cure light to get that cured. And for this process, it cures almost instantly, but just as an insurance policy, we'll usually go over the entire piece 2 or 3 times to make sure that there's nowhere we've missed hitting with that light. And finally, before this piece is going to be ready for our customer to use, we're adding our Black Forest ceramic coating. So this is going to do a few things for the piece. What you can visually see right away is it's bumping up the clarity on the epoxy, and it's bringing out more contrast in the wooden sections. But it's also increasing the durability of the piece. So it's going to make it more scratch resistant, and it's also going to create a hydrophobic surface, so any liquids that do spill on there are just going to bead up and be able to be easily wiped off as opposed to soaking into the pores of the wood. Once we've got the ceramic coating finished, we'll flip the piece over to the underside to add some of our final details. So that includes our plates to install the threaded inserts that will attach the base to the underside of this piece.
So she used to be really bumpy.
Can show you the finished product. Like I mentioned, there's chairs to go at this table, so let's head back down into the shop and show you our process for creating those. So this is one of the first chair designs that we've ever offered, and we kind of call it the Lauren because the first time we ever made it was when I made it for my now wife and then girlfriend, Lauren. One Christmas, one of the first gifts that I ever made for her was a study desk, and she needed a nicer chair to go with it. So I came up with this design. She had this chair in her bedroom for a while. Of course, when I gave it to her, I took some pictures and I posted them on our Instagram. And we've now had a few customer orders for sets of this chair. I think this is our third or fourth order we've done. And this client went with this really nice fabric that we've never done on these chairs before. And I'm excited to see what you guys think about the way that these chairs turned out. They're by no means as complicated or intricate as the Sam Malouf style chairs you've seen us do, but they just have a really minimal, beautiful look to them. This client wanted the chairs to match the base for his table, so we're doing them out of ash, and we're going to do that same blackening process that you saw us do for the base. Ash is also a really good wood to use for chairs because it is so stiff and durable. Now that being said, a lot of the dimensions on these chairs are quite heavy, so even if we were using another wood species, it's not like they would be too weak, but it still gives our client that peace of mind that he's getting some chairs that are going to last generations. Like our Sam Malouf chairs, a lot of the components for these are cut out on the CNC machine, but there's very little sculpting work that ends up getting done afterwards. It's essentially, we glue them up, we're going to sand the surfaces so that they can take that blackening process nicely, but it's all nice, square, clean, and crisp edges on these as opposed to the smooth flowing form that we do on some of our other chairs. Like the base for the table, this client wants the chairs in blackened ash. So we're starting off by gluing up the frames for the chairs, which are very simple. It's just 4 pieces of wood glued up into that square frame, secured in place with some dowels. Once the glue up is finished, we can send the pieces through our SEM to get them all cleaned up and true to their dimension before we start assembling the joinery for these chairs. Now we're not going to use a Malouf style joinery, but we are still going to use a screw to help secure and strengthen these joints here. So you can see we took out a little bit of material in the corner, just a square chunk of material that's going to match the dimension of our leg. Then we can do some handwork to route out the notch and put all of the bevels on these pieces so that our joinery will line up and we don't have to go back and manually bevel all of those edges. As an adhesive, we're using Titebond 3, which is probably overkill because these are interior chairs, so you could probably get away with something like Titebond 2. But like I've mentioned many times before, we always like to go that extra mile and go overkill. It just kind of helps us sleep at night, honestly. We know that we're not going to have anything to worry about when it comes to joinery on a piece like this. For the leg frames themselves, we just kind of have that haunch joint and then a dowel going through to secure everything in place with a whole bunch of glue on there. And we have a few chairs out there now in this style. I think the oldest one is like 7 years old and they've been holding up very, very well. Now I haven't mentioned yet that the seats and back on this chair are going to be upholstered, so you're probably thinking that they look like really uncomfortable chairs to sit on, but we're having our friends at Timeless Furniture do up some custom cushions in a really nice fabric that our client picked, and it's just going to tie these chairs in really nicely with the color of resin on the tabletop. Until we have those cushions though, we're just going to sand these pieces up to our 180 grit the same way that we would on a base and get really nice crisp detailed lines because that's what our client was going for. He wanted all of those bevels to be very sharp and show off all the different angles that these chairs have to offer. Since these chairs are a combination of some CNC work and handwork, we need to make templates unique to each individual chair to supply to Timeless so we can make sure these cushions fit on perfectly after they've applied the upholstery. So that's what we're doing here now, is making our templates, lining everything up, putting our drill holes in, and then we'll send these off and have the cushions come back to us.
It's just perfect. We have a perfect, happy chair. Yeah.
And now we can repeat that exact same finishing process that we did on the base. So the India ink followed by blackened UV oil with the India ink added into it, and that's it. And even our chairs get the little brands, so we do have a smaller size that we use for pieces like this, and they come with some adhesive tape on the back, but we always like to just put a little dab of super glue in there as well, just to make sure there's no way that's ever fallen out. And now we got those cushions picked up from Timeless, so this part's easy. We just put them in place, we put our screws in, and we can finally get this set all put together and get a look at the finished product before we send it off to our client. So part of what helps make these chairs so comfortable is the seat actually being hollow. So you notice how we had that frame of 4 pieces and there was no wood in the middle. Well, the cushion is the same way, and we have this rubber webbing that spans across that opening. So even after you've been sitting in those chairs for hours, you never bottom out, and you've always kind of got this bouncy, cushiony seat you're sitting in.
And they look, because we did them deeper. Those are actually, oh, they're kind of like.
Yeah, it's got some cushion. It's a comfy chair.
These are good chairs.
Yeah.
Just got to do the plugs.
And to top off the details, we stain up some blackened plugs, we tap them into place, and then it's outside to see how this looks in the sun.
I want to get into history books more because they tend, other than a trade route, stop doing its thing.
Hello?
I don't like sitting here.
Oh, you don't have a fence?
Yeah. I'm clear.
It's like mostly good. Yeah. It's pretty much just on the table, hey? Yep. Okay, you're
Hey,
good.
just nice and slow. You're up. Tilt
Yep.
back.
You're good. Just go nice and slow. Just not moving.
Very good. Okay, you're like 4 inches off the ground. Yep,
Yeah.
back
You
up.
have lots of room.
So we did it once in June. Down right there, wasn't it? The slab, like 4 months ago.
The color is really good. I like,
Okay, the color's actually pretty rich in the
I
sun.
like the subtle green.
You wanna help me?
Don't say it like that.
A little black and that's not
Yeah, there's some on the list.
So we've finally got this piece all finished up, and it's obviously not one of the biggest tables we've ever done, but I really love the way all the details came together on this one. So it's maple burl from our once-in-a-lifetime tree for the wood species here, and it's kind of an outside cut, so you're getting a lot of that really nice burl figuring. And it is a base layer with a clear top layer, but it's not the usual metallic pour that we do. We just did a flat color, but you'll see we still got this really nice rippled texture going throughout, and we did that by pouring our top layer when the base layer was still soft. So it's really, really nice effect in my opinion. Then the table itself is sitting on just a blackened ash X base, so this one's symmetrical for the round table. And the chairs, we have what I like to call the Lauren chair, because the first one of these that we ever built was for my wife Lauren. I built her a desk and she needed a matching chair to go with it. So this was the chair design I came up with, and it's been sold in a few packages now to our clients. Our customers seem to really like this design. It's relatively minimal, just a blackened ash frame, and then we have nice upholstered cushions that have webbed bottoms on them just to give that extra bit of comfort. And this client went with this kind of like corduroy fabric, which I think is really, really nice for this piece. So that's everything we did here. We would love to hear your thoughts on this package in the comments below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.